Hi guys, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I want to talk about the NHS pension again, and what part of the NHS pension am I going to talk about? So today I want to talk about the annual allowance of the NHS because it has seemed to perplex many people, including myself, and it was requested that I address this. I decided to have a look at it and have a read around the issue, and I found out some useful things, maybe. You can decide. So first things first, what exactly is the annual allowance? So the annual allowance is the amount of pensionable income that you can have every year, this is annual, that is tax-free. And usually, for the current year and for the past few years, this amount is around £40,000. Practically speaking, this means that if I earn around £100,000 and I have a pension contribution of 10%, that makes it about £10,000 for the year, but I somehow choose to go above and beyond and do additional pension contributions of around £30,000. That means that my total pension contributions are £40,000, and because this is equal to or less than the annual allowance, it means that I don't have to pay additional tax on this. But if my allowance somehow was reduced to £30,000 and I paid the same amount of pension, instead of having £40,000 of tax-free pension, I would have £30,000 of tax-free, and the last £10,000 would be taxed, and it would be taxed at the same tax bracket as my income, and because my income at 100k would be 40%. So for that £10,000 which is not part of my annual allowance now, this would mean that I pay £4,000 tax, because 40%. So therefore, £36,000 of that pension is actually going through if I chose to only pay that much, or I'd have to pay £44,000. Talked about right now is something which is known as tapering, or basically lowering of the annual allowance. It's not just done randomly, there is actually a systematic way of how it is calculated. Before we talk about how it's calculated, I think it's very important to have an understanding of two very important terms, and that is threshold income and adjusted income. So what the threshold income is basically how much you earn that year minus your pension contributions. So say I was earning £110,000 or £100,000 and I was paying £10,000 contribution, my threshold income would be £90,000 because £100,000 minus that £10,000. And the adjusted income would be your annual income plus your employer's contribution to your pension. So say I was earning £100,000, but the employer contributes 20%, I contribute 10%, they contribute 20%. So therefore, my adjusted income would be £120,000. Have a basic understanding of the threshold and adjusted income, we can start to talk about the tapered incomes. The tapered annual allowance for pension is contingent on your actual income. So if you have a threshold income of 110,000 and an adjusted income of above 150,000, then you will have a reduced annual allowance. What exactly is the reduction in the annual allowance? As the name suggests, it is a tapered measure. That means it will go up stepwise. And how they calculate is for every additional £2 you earn above £150,000, you lose £1 of your annual allowance. And this goes on until £210,000, where you would have lost 30,000 out of the 40,000 annual allowance. Just to elucidate the point and convey it further, if you were earning £170,000, you would lose £10,000 of your annual allowance, you'd have £30,000. If you earned £190,000, you'd have lost £20,000 of your annual allowance, and you'd have £20,000 remaining. And then finally, at £210,000, you would have lost your maximum amount and would have only a remainder of £10,000 of annual allowance left. That's what it used to be like before the 6th of April 2020. You're wondering, what exactly changed after the 6th of April 2020? And what exactly happened was that the tapering that was stopped at £210,000 of adjusted income has now come back at a later stage. So this basically targets high income earners, and it says that at a threshold income of above 200,000 and an adjusted income above 240,000, you lose another pound for every £2 you've earned until it gets to a figure of £6,000. Therefore, the total reduction in your annual allowance has reduced by £36,000 if you are earning well above £240,000, which is probably not the case for most of us in our entire lives. But if you are, then this is something that you might be worried about. So, although we have this annual allowance, it is possible for us to carry forward annual allowance from previous years. So say a few years ago you had remainders of the annual allowance, but now you don't. you can bring that forward. How can you bring that forward? So you can bring it forward by bringing any annual allowance from the past 3 years forward. So say you had £10,000 of your annual allowance remainder from 2018 or something. You can bring that forth if you've already reached the limit of your annual allowance this year. So it should be noted that you should always do your earliest year first, because next year I won't be able to access the 2018 credit, but I will be able to access the 2019 one, or however many years it is, 3 years. The final things that I would like to touch up on is that there are multiple ways of paying the tax on the pension. You can either do this by paying it yourself above and beyond the pension, or you can choose something called the scheme pays. And the scheme pays is exactly as it says on the tin. The scheme you're with pays. So for example, the NHS pension would pay this whatever you have to owe in tax. However, it does reduce the amount you get. This is because the scheme pays is basically a loan you're getting from the NHS to pay whatever tax you're due to pay, and you'll get interest on this of inflation plus something. So the plus something, I'm unsure, it can vary from time to time, but there is a nominal charge, and this is possibly even greater than the reevaluation of your pension. So just to summarize what we talked about today, first we talked about the annual allowance. Then we talked about tapering and touched on the threshold and adjusted income values definitions. After doing that, we talked about how much you can reduce your annual allowance to, and then we talked about the new further reductions of April 2020. In addition to this, we talked about carrying forward your annual allowances, which hadn't been used up from previous years up to 3 years before, and then we ended by talking about the scheme pays and how we touched on how this affects your pension. So I'm going to leave some useful documents in the description below, so just have a look at them, and if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to comment below or contact me by any means necessary. So thanks and bye, and yeah, subscribe.